Coming up on Big Ten Today, Howard Griffith, Yogi Roth. We look back on another great weekend of football action, from unbeatens to comebacks to throwbacks to field storms. We cover it all on Big Ten Today now. Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today, the Monday Schmooze. It's presented by Gatorade. Dave Remsen and Howard Griffith back from Champaign.
Yes, I was on assignment.
You were on.
I've
Howard
always
Griffith
wanted to do
is
that.
on assignment.
Yes.
Your assignment was to oversee an incredible weekend for the Fighting Illini. Obviously, you were part of the tailgate show, but everything that happened around it, it could not have been more well executed.
Yeah, I think Joshua Whitman and his staff did an unbelievable job of putting on a show. 100 years, the rededication of Memorial Stadium. I thought it was an unbelievable event. The events for the weekend, then obviously going out on the field and playing. Good job for the Illini. Nice weekend.
No doubt. We'll dive into that game in just a bit. Yogi Roth was in Piscataway. He joins us now as well, and you got a chance to see UCLA break through, Yogs.
Yeah, they just travel all the way across the country to get their first ever Big Ten win. It was amazing. But I want to know, like, if our guy had a heart rate monitor on during that ball game in Illinois, because that looks so fun. All the photos that came out, Howard, around you, around the game. I could just imagine what it was like to be you in an epic moment with the most magical uniforms I think I've seen all season long by your squad.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, we'll get into this game, but it was an outstanding game. The execution, the way they were able to come up with different plays to slow this Michigan team down and be able to execute. But I think really the pageantry that was around the game was one of the things that really, unfortunately for me, sticks out. The game was great, but everything that happened around it was unbelievable.
Honestly, the helmets might have been the coolest thing I've ever seen. They were so well executed. Everything. It was a grand slam. Good as both of those games are, and we will get to them. Our big story was in Bloomington. That is where Indiana remained unbeaten, absolutely destroying Nebraska 56-7. It's tied for the largest margin of victory ever for the Hoosiers in a Big Ten game, which is saying something. They've been in the conference since 1899, so that seems statistically significant. Not only are the Hoosiers 7-0 for the first time in more than half a century, they have yet to trail all season. The voters are slowly taking notice. IU's up 3 spots to number 13 in the AP poll, also 13th in the coaches poll. They will look to get to 8-0 Saturday at home against Washington, a game you can see right here on the Big Ten Network. Yogi will be on the call for that one. Unfortunately for Indiana, you will not see Curtis Rourke in that game. The QB's out indefinitely after injuring the thumb on his throwing hand. He is leading the nation in passing efficiency this year. Will be replaced by Taven Jackson, who threw 2 TD passes against the Huskers. IU did say it expects Rourke to return at some point this season. This is clearly a blow, no doubt, for Indiana, and we can discuss the implications of it in just a bit, but let's accentuate the positive first, guys. Indiana, Yogi, I don't know that there was a ton of doubt, I think, among the three of us that we all thought Indiana was pretty good, but any doubt that anyone had about the validity of this Indiana start was erased in emphatic fashion. That was as dominant as it gets against a pretty good team, a team that was ranked in the coaches poll.
Look, I'll double down on our good friend Joe Klatt's comments during the ball game, which was if there was a different logo on their helmet, this team would be sitting not only in the top 10, but you could argue in the top 5, just based on how they have played this year. They've pretty much dominated everybody. I mean, they really have. And to me, it, of course, starts with their head coach. When I watched this game back early this morning, the things that stood out to me were, one, offensively, the spacing was incredible. I mean, it is just workmanlike. The efficiency this offense is operating at is at an extremely high level. Of course, with Curtis Rourke at the helm, but even when Taven Jackson came in, that to me stood out. And then defensively, stop the play before any time they're about to tackle somebody. And I guarantee you, Dave, you will see at least 6 defenders around the ball. I mean, they are flying to the football every single time the ball is in the air, whether it's on the ground. Of course, the turnovers you see were a big part of this game. But overall, to me, it was kind of workmanlike. I mean, you go back and you watch this team from the UCLA game on, and this is just who they are in Big Ten play. Didn't think they'd win by as many as they did. But as the game unfolded, the timing, the spacing, the efficiency offensively, and then the way they flew to the football on defense just continues to stand out.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the timing and spacing on the offensive side, the same can be said on the defensive side as well. They are just in the right positions to make the plays that are right there in front of them. And to me, that really, you talk about paying attention to details as players, as backups, as we've seen. We'll get to the quarterback situation, I know. But this really shows you what the leadership is like on this team, because it's just not one guy. I mean, they will run waves at you. Different guys are stepping up to be able to make plays. And it just continues to go back to who's at the front of the room and really empowering these players to go do their assignments. And they've taken that responsibility, and that's what we're seeing. 7-0, going out, and Coach had talked about early in the year, we haven't played anybody, right? It's because of our schedule. Embracing that.
Right.
And just continuing to go out and play. So the message has been very clear. If you're Indiana Hoosier, just go out and do your assignment.
I mean, you think about how well Nebraska was playing. This was a top 10 scoring defense in the country. Indiana punted one time in the game. They were 7 for 7 with 7 touchdowns in the red zone. The defensive side of the ball, Nebraska had 3 turnovers all year coming in. I mean, that was one of the things that Nebraska had done so well, was avoiding the turnovers. Indiana forces 5 in this game. I mean, it was total domination. And even when Taven Jackson came in, he was tremendous. He was 7 of 9. He threw 2 touchdown passes. I mean, Howard, I think at this point we can maybe break out a little bit on our experience when we were in Bloomington. Curtis Rourke did not have a good day when we were in Bloomington. Again, it's one day of practice. It had to have been his worst because, man, he's been great. But Taven Jackson was phenomenal the day we were there.
So much so that, since I'm not a bettor, I would have bet, though, that he probably would have been the starting quarterback just because of the way he played. And I know, Yogi, you really had an appreciation for the way he operated on the field, too. But you have to give him a lot of credit because there was no reason for him to think that he was going to go out and play and to be prepared. And that's why I keep going back to, it doesn't matter who you are on this team. The message is coming from the front of the room. People are buying into, because sometimes you can get into a situation when you're playing behind someone that is playing as well as Rourke is playing, that you may not be paying attention to details. You may be feeling sorry for yourself. You didn't see that in this game. He had his opportunity and he went out and took advantage of it.
Look, you go back and you watch the spring game. Taven Jackson absolutely shined. You referenced us being there at practice. He shined. I can remember talking to him after practice that day, or even earlier this season, we had one of their early games on the Big Ten Network, and just said to him, hey, how you feeling? And he goes, I'm just staying ready. I'm so locked in. I love this coaching staff. Tino Sinceri is as good of a quarterback developer as you'll find in the country. I mean, he's skyrocketing. He, alongside Mike Shanahan, their offensive coordinator, these two guys have this offense in great sync. And I think that when you looked at his game, and I remember him even in high school, he was an Elite 11 quarterback. I mean, this is a premier prospect. This isn't a guy who's kind of fight and clawed his way up to this level of football. He's premier. So what am I saying by that? His highs have always been really high. I think the challenges for Taven Jackson is the lows were sometimes low. And I think when you're choosing a starting quarterback, you want consistency. So now, as they called this game in his 26 snaps he played on Saturday, you saw them call a game that was really easy for him to see and operate in. And I'd also imagine that he's taken his game to another level. And if he can make sure he doesn't have any self-inflicted negative plays when he hits the field Saturday against UW, there's no reason this offense cannot continue to play at the level they're operating at, because there's so many pieces to it. Right? He's just got to be his 111. He doesn't have to come in and carry this team and be a guy in the quarterback run game. Like, it's not that type of scenario. That's not the operation. If he can come in and play steady, look out, because Indiana can continue rolling.
Yeah, really, really impressive. And remember, we're talking about a guy who started 5 games last year, won a couple of them, so he's been in the spotlight to a certain extent, not to this extent by any stretch. I mean, no one on Indiana has, frankly. It's a remarkable story. Guys, I think we'd be making a huge mistake if we didn't talk about Nebraska here and how thoroughly they were dominated. Yeah. Matt Rule said after the game he did not see this coming. He thought they were going to play really competitively. I think the symbolism here is significant. We're talking about trying to rebuild the Nebraska program. It's year 2 for Matt Rule, fairly or unfairly. the Nebraska fans are going to look at this. They're going to say it's year 2 here for Nebraska. It's year 1 for a new coach at Indiana, a program that has been at the bottom of the Big Ten standings more often than not for years and years and years. And yet Nebraska goes out and just gets thoroughly manhandled. So what do you do now if you're the Huskers when you seem like you're on a really good upward trajectory?
I think they still have to stay true. Obviously, the turnovers were a big part of it, but stay really ultimately true to who you are and what's gotten you to this particular point. And you can go back and you look at this game and you can see the mistakes that are out there. They are correctable mistakes. These aren't situations where they were just outmanned, where they just didn't have the talent to be able to go out and execute. This is where they have to go. And this is what's so hard. I mean, listen, this is an exciting time to be a college football fan, but it's also a tough time. Because you look around and we never stay focused on our own team, right? We're looking at this team and that team.
Nothing happens in a vacuum, though, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you see what's going on in Bloomington, and this isn't just at Nebraska. This is all over the country. They're saying, well, why can't we? Why aren't we doing this? Something's wrong with us. But I don't think that's necessarily the case with Nebraska. It takes time. And also, remember, Coach Rule has just had the success of going into that second year. That was part of the reason we all were excited about this team, along with the talent. But this is always going to be tough to have a rebuild and try to turn the fortunes of your organization around. Yeah, Coach Cignetti's success in Indiana put the pressure on everybody else who's not in their first year, to your exact point. I think there's a couple things to look at when you watch this game back. It's 14-7 with about 7:40 left in the second quarter, and you're thinking, okay, we got a ball game here. And then, boom, it just gets out of control. And this always happens. If you track it back for the majority of freshman starting quarterbacks, there's a game a year where it just doesn't go well, right? And I say that because it's always going to be a series of firsts for all of these freshman quarterbacks. It's his first time in this environment, the first time getting blown out, the first time really being off schedule. You go back and you watch this game, and Dylan Raiola never looked comfortable. Even his early throw in the ball game, he gets rid of it really early. It's like he's trying to anticipate where the pressures are coming in this very exotic defense that he had to face. So they'll be fine. He'll grow from this. They'll learn from this. The challenge is their schedule doesn't get any easier, and that's going to be part of the growth with a freshman starting quarterback in a place that when you have a little success, the hype just goes crazy. And we were there for it. We all saw that. We thought this was a playoff caliber team. They're going to get it right. They'll get it back to that level. But right now, it's going to be a year of a few firsts in the next couple of weeks. And then now this one is the first time you really got to respond from a blowout loss that we just described.
Tough place to respond. As you said, though, Yogi, the schedule does not get easier. No. In fact, some might argue it gets more difficult. They go to Columbus to take on an angry Ohio State team coming up this weekend. What a day in Champaign. 100 years in one day after Illinois took down defending national champ Michigan, thanks to a history-making performance from the legendary Red Grange on the day they dedicated Memorial Stadium. The Illini rededicated the stadium and took out the defending national champs again. A 21-7 win. It was witnessed by a sellout crowd, which included the only man ever to score more points in a game for the Illini than Grange did that day, and that, of course, is our own Howard Griffith. We talked about the execution of the day, and it was amazing. Let's talk about the football game. Illini really played well on the defensive side. They flustered Michigan and then took advantage of the opportunities they got offensively. Really could not have gone better from Illinois' point of view. Yeah, I think one of the things you have to go back and you have to look at what happened against Purdue in the second half, when Purdue was really able to do a great job of running the football with the quarterback and really kind of dominated them up front. So coming into this game, you kind of had a feel, well, what is Michigan going to want to do? They're going to run the football, right? And they were able to do that early. We were able to have some success, but Illinois settled down defensively, and the turnovers obviously were a big part of it, and that kind of speaks to what this defense has been able to do for the majority of the year. It's turned teams over, and then you come up with a huge special teams play. Right? And what a great call.
Right. You need to have some of these plays in a game, right? And they were able to execute. It's not like they've probably been practicing it for a couple of months, and you finally get that opportunity to use it, and they pull it out, and it absolutely works for them. Momentum.
It was impressive, man, on so many levels, right? I want to go to the defense because, look, there was nothing doing for Michigan all game long. I mean, this secondary of Illinois, they were gloved up on these wideouts all game. I mean, guys weren't getting open, and when they were, they weren't completing the pass, right? Big opportunity. Jack Tuttle to his tight end. They missed one in the first half. But other than that, there wasn't much open. I mean, bottom line, guys, I mean, Illinois, you go back to the Nebraska game, late against Purdue, or this game, to me, they're winning in the margins. They're doing the little things defensively. They're suffocating offenses. I mean, they've done a beautiful job. This game, I think, was the most complete game defensively all season long, not just creating turnovers and gaining the points off it, but they made life challenging all game long for this Michigan offense. I mean, this is an offense that we expect to move the ball. This is an offense that a lot of teams around the country would trade personnel for. I mean, I get that it's challenging, but they've recruited as well as, you could argue, a lot of teams in the country, and there just wasn't anything doing there. It was great coverage. At times, they were disguising the pass rush lanes. They were twisting on the offensive line. The communication up front for Michigan, I thought, struggled at times, especially on key downs in this ball game. And Illinois, I think, at least to me, it was like, hey, this is a really good story. They're going to be a tough out. Now, this is a real game that they have coming up this weekend against the number one team in America in Oregon, and they deserve all the credit because this, again, was workmanlike. They were the better team on Saturday night. They deserved the win. They earned it in every facet of the ball game. Then they did the little things. The fake punt. Are you kidding me? The 2-point play. I mean, those are really cool elements to watch a game unfold. There you go. You see the touchdown there before the half. We just had a lot of nice things in this ball game.
Yeah, if you look at Illinois' schedule, kind of to your point, here's the fake punt with Arkin, which is just fabulous. If you look at Illinois' schedule, I mean, obviously the Oregon game, you're going to be a prohibitive underdog. Aside from that, every single one of these games, I think you could make an argument that they're easily could win them. Mm-hmm. And then if you're a two-loss team, even if you lose to Oregon, but if you play them tight, two-loss team, I mean, you could absolutely be in the discussion for the college football playoff. The flip side is not true of Michigan. They are not going to make the playoff. I think they're right now playing for, can we make a bowl game? Can we salvage something from this season? Michigan scored 7 points in this game. It's the fewest they've scored in a decade, 2014, the last year under Brady Hoke. And Yogi, you talked about it, just looked lost on offense. They're on their third starting quarterback in Jack Tuttle. What now for the Wolverines as they head into a big rivalry game on our air on Saturday?
Well, to me, everything needs to shrink, right? Whether you got to shrink the community that you're around so you're just staying positive, whether you got to shrink the playbook so you just execute the things that you feel really good about. I mean, the defense is still playing at a really high level. Make no mistake about it. I mean, Illinois earned everything, right? 10 points off of those turnovers. But offensively, I just wonder what the quarterback room is like. I mean, you've started 3 different quarterbacks this year. What's the confidence level when you walk into the position meeting on a Monday with Kirk Campbell and company? That's where I would go. And I would say, okay, whoever we're going to go with, or maybe we're going to play Alex Orji again and utilize some of this quarterback run game. And there's not a defensive coordinator in America that enjoys preparing for that. Right? If they do that against Michigan State, or if they're going to roll with Jack Tuttle, like whatever it is they decide to do, to me, they got to make sure they're playing and calling the most confident plays that these guys have. Because there were at times, at least when I was watching this one back, that they were kind of just trying to force things, just trying to will things, right? There's such pride in this institution. Listen to Jack Tuttle after the game. I mean, I've known Jack since he was 16. I've never heard him talk that way. I mean, he was angry after the game, and rightfully so. This is a team that is frustrated. You can feel it. So you've got to pop that frustration. You've got to shrink the change and the opportunity for change. So it's just the people in the building. Like, do not take a phone call. Do not go on social media. Don't do anything. Just hone in for this rivalry game because you are capable to win. I mean, it's not like they can't go win this game. They can't go on a run. They have the horses to do that. But right now, offensively, they got to find ways to get completion because they have struggled, in my eyes, of finding 10, 12-yard gains, just things that can move the sticks. They need to find a way to do that if they want to go bowling and make some noise throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think there have been opportunities. I know there's a lot of grief or a lot of criticism around the wide receiver group of whether or not they've been able to get open. They're getting open. They just have to be able to get the football to them. There's so many things that are involved at this particular point. They're able to run the ball sometimes, able to do that. But then when you turn the football over, and we understand that it's no way you can do it and attempt to win games, particularly on the road, they've got to find a way for that room in particular to take care of the football. We understand that was the whole reasoning behind why they went with Warren at the beginning. But as you mentioned, when you have a quarterback that can run, you got to figure out how to utilize him. But the psyche of this team right now and that particular room, or an offense in general, You have to put something together where these guys can go out and have success. There's enough stuff on tape that you can put together and say, look, guys, if we take care of our business, we can go out and do the things we need to do and salvage the season. But this is a tough situation for them on the offensive side in that quarterback room. And it's really going to show what this team is ultimately made of and what this room is made of, because it's a tough spot for them to be in.
As you said, turnovers a huge part of it. They have 15 now in 7 games. They had 8 turnovers in 15 games last year. So just night and day difference there. They're out of the polls now after 54 straight weeks of being in. That was the 4th longest active streak in the country. Speaking of the poll, there is a new number 1. It is the Oregon Ducks, first time atop the rankings since 2012. Once again, the Big Ten, 3 of the top 4 in the nation. Ducks a perfect 7-0 after blanking Purdue 35-0 in West Lafayette. Oregon's first road shutout since 1992. Not much doubt in this one, Yogi. They scored touchdowns in their first 3 drives, just kind of cruised from there. What do you make of number 1 Oregon?
Well, they remain, in my eyes at least, the most improved team in America. You know, we called their opener, and you look at the game that they played on the Friday night that you just referenced, and every week this team has just grown and grown and grown. And they did what I think other number 1s this season haven't done, which is when they get tested on the road, do they meet the moment? Do they have a letdown? They didn't flinch. I mean, this was dominant in a bunch of levels. They didn't have Terrence Ferguson, the tight end, who hopefully they get back soon, underwent an appendectomy. But defensively, I just love what this defensive front continues to do. 2nd straight week without Jordan Burch. And 2.5 weeks ago, we sat on this show and loved up how dominant he was as the edge rusher. Mm-hmm. Well, now let's love up Mateo Uyunglele, Tatum Tuioti. This defensive front, I mean, again, they shut it all down. I love what they've done, how they continue to come to work. We've seen the explosive play. Evan Stewart is growing up before our eyes as a real weapon. Offensive line continues to grow. I mean, they look like the number 1 team in America. It would be fun to see them match up. I mean, who wouldn't want to see them play Georgia and Dan Lanning against his old mentor and Kirby Smart? It's a long ways away. But ultimately, they did what Bama couldn't do, what Georgia couldn't do, what Texas couldn't do, and they sat at number 1, which is continue to evolve. Like, those guys all stumbled to a degree, regardless of opponent. So I like what they've done. They get another test this weekend, but I'll go back to the words I started the season off with. Their DNA traits, man. Connection, growth, toughness, and sacrifice, and the growth we continue to see.
Yeah, I think one of the things you can look at a couple of those games early, right? And there were things that they needed to do. This team, there's no question about the talent that they have, but it's about coming together and be able to execute. And that's something that clearly they struggled with the first 2 weeks. That can be a learning tool. That can be something you can lean on, because each and every week you're telling your team, hey, we're still not there. You're supposed to be the number 1 team in the country. Certainly you're not playing like that. But they keep finding ways to improve each and every week, and that's the biggest thing. And I think when you can start to have your guys step up defensively, defense is what's going to travel. Offensively, there are going to be some struggles. There are going to be, here and there, you're going to have some situations where your opponent is going to win some of those matchups. But defensively, when you can stay stout, turn that football over, and make it hard on that opponent, those are the teams that end up being a tough out. And that's why I think we continue to see this team really improve.
And even on that side of the ball, after pitching a shutout, Dan Lanning wasn't thrilled with the way they played. If you listen to his post-game comments, he said, we've got to tackle better. That was a theme early on this year. And the things that they have emphasized, to both of your points, they've gotten better at, particularly the offensive line, the run game, some of those issues that reared their heads early on this year. So if he focuses on something,
they're number 1, Reverend, he's still not satisfied.
Well, right, but I mean, that's kind of the message you're going to send, right? Back on Big Ten today, Wisconsin ran its win streak to 3 on Saturday, taking down Northwestern 23-3, avenging last season's loss in Madison. The defense was the story for Wisconsin, holding the Cats to just 209 total yards. They've allowed just 16 points total during their win streak, which also includes victories over Purdue and Rutgers. Yogi, this is a Badgers team that really seems to have turned the corner. They are playing well. What has stood out to you?
Well, to me, what stands out is you look at the standings. Like, I've got them to my right, and I look over and I see them, right? And you're like, whoa, oh my God, like what a run by this team. I love what they said after the game. Their head coach referenced the edge, the chip that they had after what happened a year ago in this very game. So excited for them. To me, they're a team that has to win in the margins. And I think there's about 5 or 6 teams in this league, much like Wisconsin, that have to do the little things, right? Whether they win on special teams, blocking kicks, doing well in the return game, scoring off of turnovers, all things that they did in this game. I mean, to me, it really swung their way at the end of the first half. Northwestern decides to go forward, sack, cause fumble. They get the ball inside their own 5. Very next play, they score a touchdown, and they're truly in command in the second half against a team in Northwestern that didn't really create any explosive plays after the first few drives of the ball game. So big props for Wisconsin and that staff and that program. I think it was a workmanlike win. And for this team, we didn't know after that Alabama game where they were going to go. How were they going to navigate it? And they haven't flinched. So excited for them. A big win, I think, for them as they look to possibly getting into bowl contention with their 5th win of the season.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to watch this team because it was just a couple of weeks ago when the sky was falling.
Yes.
Right? But I think it had everything to do with some of the teams that they were playing and the identity of who the Badgers ultimately are. And when they can run the football, we know that this team's going to be a tough out, and defensively they've really stepped up their game on that side and become more comfortable with who they are as a defensive unit. Even when you think of Locke under center, he made some mistakes in this game, but he knows how to grow from them. And I think that's the process you're seeing with him, the growth. That now he's under center, he understands that he's the true leader of this team, and he has to do all the things that he can do to put this team in position. But their playmakers are making plays for him, and that's huge.
To your point, has not been murderer's row,
Yeah.
these 3 here, Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern. I think the next step for them now is, can you beat someone that you're not supposed to beat? Yeah. And they have not beaten a ranked team yet under Luke Fickell. They're 0-4. They have a huge opportunity to do it this week at home against Penn State. They still have a home game against Oregon. I think we've seen proof of concept here for Wisconsin these last few weeks, that this is working, that it's going to work, that you don't have to panic like people were maybe a few weeks ago. But can you take the next step now? We're going to find out starting with this huge game against Penn State. As for another game with Northwestern, that team that Wisconsin beat last week, of course, they beat Maryland a week ago, but the Terps got back on track, rallying from 14 down in the 4th quarter to top USC 29-28. Billy Edwards threw for a career-high 373 yards, had the game-winning touchdown run as well. The Terps halted their 5-game conference home losing streak. 4 losses now for the Trojans in Big Ten play by a grand total of 14 points. Yogi, it felt like things were coming off the rails a little bit for Maryland when they lost to Northwestern last week, a game where the Wildcats pulled away in the 4th quarter. A lot of hand-wringing in College Park. Now, a totally different story a week later. What did you take from the resilience of this Maryland team and the fact that they were able to shake off that loss and get a really impressive win?
Oh, big props to Mike Loxley and this entire staff for keeping these guys engaged. Because even watching this game, you're thinking it's 28-14. You're like, okay, SC gets a tough road win. Maryland goes down, and away the narrative goes. And I love what Coach Loxley said after the post-game press conference. He said, look, I don't want any new friends. He said, we kept it in-house, and we pushed all the chips into the middle of the table. And they wanted to go for it. Even after the interception, he told Billy Edwards on the sideline, hey, you got to release it. We're going to get the ball back. They do after that field goal block, and then they run down and, of course, get the score, and away we go, and the fans end up storming the field. So overall, I just think it's a huge win. And from covering SC for as long as I have, when a team beats them, whether SC is top 10 in America or down like they seemingly are, at least with their record right now, even though they've all been close, it is a huge deal because it is a blue blood in college football. So whether it was Minnesota a couple weeks ago or Maryland this past weekend, it's a massive opportunity for them. It's only going to help in recruiting. I know a bunch of recruits were there. I know how they love to recruit that area. And for Billy Edwards, for him to compete, the receiving corps to step up after a week ago where they really didn't have a lot of success, and to do it at home. It was pretty impressive. I know some people were leaving that stadium, it sounded like, late in that 4th quarter. Well, I hope they all rushed on back because that was a great finish.
I don't know if you heard Locks after the game. He said, I would have left too. So he didn't blame him. I mean, it wasn't looking good, but those who stayed were rewarded for sure.
You know what's interesting about this team, and this has kind of been a little bit of the narrative for a while for this team is they'll drop the game that they shouldn't. Right? They'll have some of those, and then all of a sudden they'll come up with a huge game and a huge performance. This is a team that, listen, this is a huge win. I think they needed this for their psyche as well. But they've got to figure out a way to consistently be able to stack these games, because we've talked about this team being able to take that next step. And they have the talent that's there to do it. They just have to be consistent enough and get that done, and they haven't shown the ability to do it. That's why this week will be important after a huge win like they had. How do you react? How do you respond? Do you come out lackadaisical, or are you focused as soon as the game starts?
They head to Minnesota this week, another team that, of course, has beaten USC. We got to talk about the Trojans here. It feels a bit like the same story every week. I mean, it's pretty remarkable when you think they are 3-4. They have led in all 7 of their games this year. They've led in the fourth quarter of all of their losses. It's kind of the same story over and over again. Howard, what do you make of what's going on now with the Trojans?
It's tough to say, because, you know, it has to be in the psyche as well, right? Because they get into the second half of games, they're really playing well early, and in the second half, you know, the wheels start to fall off, and you don't understand why. So I think it ultimately goes back to they just got to keep pressing, right, to try to figure this thing out. But they have to get a win. They have to get over the hump, because this second half collapse that we've been witnessing this year is not the way this team should be playing, and not the way they're built either.
I think a couple things stand out. One is you look at the last 2 weeks, and there's like just a handful of plays. You could argue like 1 or 2 throws that you see USC make and complete all day long, right, all season long. But late in the ballgame, they haven't. It's allowed both teams to come on back, whether it was Penn State or whether it was Maryland. I think defensively, the loss of Eric Gentry, it cannot be understated. I mean, this guy truly impacted every offense they played. He stands at 6'6". His wingspan is, 7'6" and a quarter. I mean, just massive. And he didn't play in the Penn State game. We saw what they did in terms of Tyler Warren. He didn't play in this game. I thought they were impacted with the loss of him, along with Anthony Lucas. So what's the reality? The net to me is this is a team, and I've said it all year long, it's a foundational year for them. I think within that program, within those walls, this is a group that is confident, that does believe in what they're going to do, because they can knock off any team that they play any given week, and we've seen that. The margin of victory clearly proves it. Now, to me, I start talking about like the emotional exhaustion of this team. I think that's a real thing in college football. When you play a bunch of tight games, God, it just can be hard, and all of a sudden you don't find a win, and instead of giving you a little bit of boost, it can deplete you. So for this coaching staff, for Lincoln Riley, this might be the most critical week of his season, of just making sure this team gets back on track. Because there's a fine line between hoping things go well at the end of a game or, hey, knowing we can end the game. We can run with Woody Marks in this 4-minute offense, or we can complete an RPO, or whatever it might be. And that, to me, is the coaching element. I look forward to watching them compete this weekend on a Friday night. I'm glad it's a short week for them, because they got to focus. They got to jump right back into it. It's an opportunity against a very scrappy team in Rutgers. Was just there this past weekend. But I don't think the sky is falling for SC. I do not think it's falling apart by any stretch. I think it's a foundational year for them, and they've got to find a way to finish games. And I think they'll get there eventually, I think, this season. But to say I saw them competing for bowl eligibility, I'd be lying. I thought this team would be able to get some of those wins late with the playmakers that you referenced, but they haven't. That's the reality, and they have to snap out of that and find a way to finish the games and be confident when games are late versus being a little shaky, a little bit too emotional based on past experiences.
Well, the sky may not be falling in your estimation, Yogi, but I mean, 9 losses in 14 games. You've got some of their former star players coming out publicly on social media and expressing their dissatisfaction. It's been a rough week. To your point, they've got to play well, and they've got to win against Rutgers, a Rutgers team that will be in desperate need of a win as well when they play on Friday night. Gatorade game leaders taking a look at the Big Ten standings through 8 weeks of the season. Still 3 unbeatens: Oregon, Penn State, Indiana. 3 teams with just 1 conference loss: Illinois, Wisconsin, Ohio State, and then 6 more at 500 in the conference, a group that includes both Iowa and Michigan State. Those 2 met in East Lansing, Yogi, and this felt like, we were talking all week, this felt like a line of scrimmage game. And it was a line of scrimmage game. I think what threw a lot of us off, myself included, was the team that dominated the line of scrimmage wasn't the one that we were expecting to. Michigan State really handed it to Iowa. They kind of out-Iowa'd Iowa in this one. What stood out as you watched it?
Well, I think that for sure. I also go to the offense because the thing they do better than Iowa is in terms of explosive plays or just offensive productivity. And Aidan, Chiles, to me, grew up before our eyes on Saturday night in prime time. When you look at his first quarter, he goes 4-9, throws a pick. The rest of the game, he's 18 of 21. I love this category. I call it PACE. Plays after critical errors. So you chart the drive after a critical error, after a turnover. Watch the drive when he comes back in after throwing an interception. It's a deep ball down the sideline. It's an RPO. He runs with his legs, gets his helmet knocked off, has to set out a play, comes on right back. And I just think his maturity, when you think about the first couple weeks of the season, times he was thrown into coverage, he was trying to will throws to be completed, will big plays to happen. I think we're watching him under Brian Lindgren, their offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, and of course Jonathan Smith, who's excellent in terms of growing this position. We're watching him evolve, like we really are. And then when you can run the football behind this offensive front and the style in which they run it, I mean, they got an outside zone scheme that I know, Howard, you love because you played in it. But then the complements off it, whether it's a tight end out the back door, an over route, like they just keep you honest. And I think that Aidan Chiles is operating it with tremendous poise. So that's my biggest takeaway. And then when you look at big picture of this team, could have won the Boston College game. They drove it inside the 20 the first 3 drives of the game against Ohio State. I mean, this is a good team. If they don't give it to the other team, they got a shot in every ball game to be really dangerous. Outside of that Oregon game, they were in every one this year in the first half for the most part. So they're a team that's hurt themselves at times. They didn't do it enough for Iowa to get a win, and they did enough good things to dominate that thing, to your point, at the line of scrimmage and force too many missed tackles.
Yeah, I think when you look at Iowa, the way they played a week ago with that offense and what Michigan State was able to do to slow them down, yes, Johnson had the big run, but they, for the most part, were able to keep the run game bottled up. And one of the things that you never want to see when you have a zone blocking scheme is penetration inside, because that throws everything off. And I thought Michigan State did a great job of getting up the field, creating pressure, creating havoc, and being able to make plays on the back end. I think as we talk about Chiles and continue to grow, that's the part that really helps him, his ability to lean on his legs at times. But defensively, coming up with the big plays when they needed to. I know they're going against a challenged offense, but this is an offense that a week ago really looked like an offense that put on a clinic, particularly in the run game.
Yeah, I think the thing that's curious for Iowa is the degree to which the defense seems to have slipped. It's still a good defense. It's well above average as a defense, but
we're spoiled.
We are spoiled, right? The expectation is for them to be fabulous year in and year out, and that allows for more margin for error offensively. And on a day where Caleb Johnson, aside from the one big run, as you said, other than that, he was bottled up. Iowa didn't really have the ability to stretch the field at all in the pass game, and as a result, Michigan State getting the win. There's one other game to get to. We mentioned it off the top. Yogi witnessed it in person, and that was UCLA getting its first conference win as a Big Ten member. The Bruins, who hadn't scored more than 17 points all season coming in, put up 35 in a 3-point win at Rutgers. Ethan Garbers was the story, 32 of 38, 383 yards, 4 TDs. Those 4 scoring passes equaled his season total coming in. And Yogi, we were talking about this quite a bit leading into this game, that UCLA had played not just a tough schedule, but according to Pro Football Focus, it was the toughest schedule in the country. So it explained away some of their problems, particularly on the offensive side. But man, they took it out on Rutgers, and it really felt like it clicked here for the Bruins.
Yeah, and they did it in a variety of ways. You look at those 2 last highlights that you watched. It was Keegan Jones and it was Jalen Berger, 2 running backs catching the ball and taking it the distance. I just think that Eric Bieniemy and Deshaun Foster, they've been under a ton of scrutiny because they haven't been able to run the football, haven't had success running the football, but they found ways to get their playmakers the rock, whether it was a traditional handoff, whether it was out of the backfield, whether it was an angle route like TJ Harden had a touchdown in that ball game as well. And then how about Ethan Garbers? I mean, this is a guy who has been hit more than anybody in America, truly. And he didn't flinch. And the fact that he has the longest run of UCLA's season, shocked all of us probably. But B, also shows that this guy's determination and his understanding of the system. I thought he saw the field extremely clean against a defense that was trying to confuse him. And I get Rutgers was down a bunch of players, but I thought we watched two teams battle all day long. And for the Bruins, God, it was a well-fought, earned win. Deshaun Foster told his team last week they were going to have to earn it. And I think they did, having called that game. Glad they finally got in the win column for their first-time head coach.
You think about this. When you have some of the defeats that they've had all season, right, and it's been a struggle, but you turn the tape on, and I think this is an important part when you're looking at teams and trying to see where they're going. You could turn that tape on. It didn't matter whether it's the first quarter or a minute left in the fourth. These guys were playing hard. And that means that they're accepting the things that are going on around them. They just have to be able to execute, and that's where they've gotten to. So it's good to see them be able to come up with the win, because I think this is something that they can build from.
Really heartening on their end. From Rutgers' point of view, it has been frustrating. Yogi pointed out they were very banged up in this game, and I do think it's fair to point that out. But three straight losses. They haven't led in any of those games, and you just think about how favorable the schedule was going into this year. They really need to figure out a way to finish positively, make sure they make it to a bowl game. Greg Schiano after the game said, hey, we're going to get there. Yeah. I promise you we're going to get there. But I think it's tough to argue that this wasn't a setback here in front of a home crowd. Time to go around the Big Ten. We'll start with volleyball. Good weekend for the conference's highest-ranked teams. Then second-ranked Nebraska got a Friday sweep, a day that also saw Wisconsin top Oregon, number 9 over number 11 there. Third-ranked Penn State swept a ranked Gophers team in yesterday's highest-profile matchup, 10th straight win for the Nittany Lions. We mentioned the Huskers were number 2 over the weekend. They are now number 1 after Pitt lost last week to SMU. Penn State remains third. In all, the Big Ten, 7 of the top 16 teams in the nation in the latest poll. The list also includes Wisconsin, Oregon, Purdue, USC, and Minnesota. Northwestern field hockey still undefeated after pounding Cal Davis yesterday. 15-0 to start the year for the Cats, their best start ever. Big one for them Friday here on the Big Ten Network as the second-ranked Wildcats will visit number 7, Michigan. UCLA women's soccer continues to impress. Jaden Perry, the lone goal, as the 10th-ranked Bruins top number 15 Ohio State in Westwood. That victory sets up a showdown with USC that you can see here on the network, both undefeated in the conference. The winner captures the regular season crown. We have UCLA men's soccer tonight. Really good matchup. Bruins visit Maryland. Couple top 20 teams going at it there. Coverage begins at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Women's hockey, number 1, Wisconsin swept the weekend border battle with third-ranked Minnesota. The Badgers rallied from 3 goals down to win 4-3 on Saturday. That's after a 5-0 win Friday. 6th straight victory for Wisconsin over Minnesota, the Badgers' longest ever streak in that series. It is time for the helmet stickers rewarding weekend football excellence. Yogi, lead us off.
Okay, I'm going to go to a couple team captains. Let's go Aidan Chiles. I thought what he did after the first quarter was phenomenal. Starts off 4 of 9, throws a pick, doesn't flinch, finishes the game 18-21. Big win for Michigan State. Congrats to him. Help us sticker number 1. Number 2 is right here in LA. I'm going to another captain, Ethan Garber. It's been a challenging year. He's been hit a lot. His jersey was pretty clean on Saturday, and he left people in the dust with a 49-yard touchdown run, also career high passing for him. And then I gotta go to Illinois. How about the director of football equipment operations, Jake Rosh? Okay, man, I got a little spot behind me in my set here, and I want to clear out some area for a helmet like that, because that was as good as I have seen, I think, in my entire life. The uniform, the helmet, it was phenomenal. A referee had to go up to the helmet and actually touch it to make sure that it wasn't a leather helmet. So if you want, right here, man, right here, send one in. It'll never leave.
Yogi, a lot of people are buying for that helmet right now, so hold on, and maybe you'll get one.
You too.
Devon Jackson, let's go in. I've been on this defensive kick for a while now. Really did an outstanding job. 4 tackles, 2 TFLs, a forced fumble. Gabe Ackes, 13 tackles, 2.5 sacks, and another forced fumble. Let's go on the offensive side. Billy Edwards, really, 78%, 373 yards. Really's playing well. Now, I need him to do that next week. Put that consistency together.
He was my Saturday standout. He was great. How about Jonathan Kim? 6 field goals,
nice.
Tied for the most ever in a conference game by a Big Ten kicker.
Pretty good.
Yeah, that's pretty good. 8 games this weekend. We have a ton to discuss over the next 4 days. Be sure to join us here on Big Ten Today. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good one.